All right, we have a special little treat for you. We're going to change speeds a little bit from that hardcore, hard-hitting proof of concept stuff, and we're going to talk with a special guest. But first, before I do that, I want to take the pleasure now of introducing my colleague, Dr. David Harwell. David is my colleague there here at ACS. He's housed in the Membership and Scientific Advancement office. I'm, of course, with Madeline's office. Two separate buildings, and sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. He is the administrator for the Entrepreneurship Initiative as a whole. He's sort of, kind of like my boss. Okay, all right, I got it out, David, I did. All right, he's also responsible for ACS's Career Pathways Initiative, which provides career development and management services to ACS members. Currently, David focuses much of his energies on education and awareness programs for job seekers. And he's got kind of a new task here. It's going to be very interesting. So please join me in welcoming David and his special guest. Dave?
Thank you very much, Ken. So today, we're going to interview Michael Lefenfeld. Michael Lefenfeld is the president and CEO of SiGNa Chemical Company. It's not his first company to start. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But Michael is also the chair of our Entrepreneurial Initiative Advisory Board. So that's the group that brings programming like this to you at ACS. We have two other members of the advisory board present. So one is Judy Jordan, and she's in the back there. And we also have Sadiq Shah, who's up here in the front and spoke previously. Judy's going to speak tomorrow. She's running a panel for us. There are several other members of that group that are not here today, but that have influenced the program so far. But really what we're here for is to find out more about you, Michael. So this is SiGNa Chemical Company. How many? That's your third venture, right?
Fourth, yes.
Fourth venture.
Yeah.
So a fourth successful venture, or were there others?
There were others. There's always, your first idea is never your most successful idea. So each company took through an evolution of product development where SiGNa Chemistry now was originally an idea that was thought of by my grandfather. It was a bathroom deodorizer. He stopped smoking years and years ago and wanted something he could take with him to the bathroom, drop in the toilet, and make it smell like flowers when he left. So he asked me to come up with something that he could take with him. That was the original concept behind SiGNa, and as we were developing ways to volatilize a fragrant oil off the surface of water, you think heat, you think gas. So you thought sodium metal. And, right, as a chemist, that's what you come up with. So the problem is that little flame, it sort of gets in the way. So ultimately what we thought about was a way to stabilize those metals. And what we found out was something much more powerful than just reducing water, but something that we could use for all chemistry, all reactive metal chemistries without the handling issues and all the oxidation issues and all the dangers that are typically involved with the supply chain of reactive metals, sodium, lithium, potassium. So the first product was not so successful, but the second product has now turned itself into a rather large growing organization.
Well, one of the things that we wanted to get out of today's interview is really what makes you successful?
Luck. Better lucky than smart is always the saying. But what comes from that is also you have to be smart enough to recognize when you're getting lucky. And that's really been the key to it. I've been very fortunate to surround myself with great people in situations where ideas are cultivated. Ideas are ultimately broadened from a strong basis. From my days in school through today, I've been doing research and product development, from a very, very early age. So, better lucky than smart, but also smart enough to know that I may have something in front of me.
But there were some steps that you took to be more successful. I mean, where did SiGNa Chemical start?
Well, in the case of SiGNa, it really is about putting yourself around the smartest team. As a founder of an organization, you're the smartest person on the basis of the technology, but you don't want to be the smartest person at everything. You want to surround yourself with people that are truly more innovative, more knowledgeable, more experienced in a broad discipline that is a company. At the earliest stages, you need help from everybody. You need, friends, family. You always hear about, the first funding round is always, friends and family, or, you can benefit from your wide network of consultants and experts in the field. I was so fortunate to have, members of the ACS, even George Whitesides put me in touch with my first head of catalysis at SiGNa. I was rather lucky, to be talking to him, and he had somebody that fit perfectly. So it's really about using that network that we've all established throughout, no matter how long you've been doing this, whether you're in, there was that high schooler yesterday that sold that very large company to Yahoo. I'm going to assume he wasn't doing it from his bedroom. He probably had some people that helped branch that out. So it's really about getting that network and having that support team around you that can complement your skill set and bring to you those other skill sets. As unfortunately, scientists are often categorized as a little bit introverted or not most outgoing. We try and build off those other people that have those skill sets that you may not have yourself. And that's really an important trick to really getting your idea off the ground. Can't do it all yourself.
Well, when you talk about tricks, so in terms of your network, and I know we've talked before, sometimes you characterize yourself as introverted, but you developed this network. How did you do that? Were there things that you can share with the audience that they could learn from?
You want to use all the technology around you is always a great way to do it. Like the Entrepreneurial Resource Center, which is coming, the ACS is bringing forward, which is going to be a huge network for chemical or technological startups to bridge that networking ability. But there's also, there are people that I found just by, going on a simple LinkedIn page or going to an ACS national conference or a physical society conference, just to really get that breath. Then there's the fundraising conferences, and there's always take a meeting. There's a lot of us think our time is always so stretched, but there's no downside to taking a meeting if nothing comes from it. You never know what you're going to be doing in the future that you can maybe benefit off of having that meeting. So really taking that meeting and forcing yourself to get out into those situations truly is the best benefit you can do for somebody who is an entrepreneur. It's not something that's easily learned. It's really something that's an innate quality. You don't really, have that penchant to stay home sick. You don't take those vacation days. You really, you live in. Unfortunately, you, depending on where you are in your family setting, could be I've always looked at, if I'm in a relationship, my company is typically my mistress in that case. It really is one of those things that really does encompass a lot of your time, and it's an important part of your being.
So, with every company, it's a struggle in the beginning, but at some point it tips. And you have at least some idea that it's going to be successful. When did that happen with SiGNa?
Well, with SiGNa, I guess that tipping point was it was actually very early on. We had first started this reactive metal business, and my background, I'm a general scientist. My advanced degree is in chemistry, but my undergraduate degrees are in engineering and physics. And so chemistry wasn't necessarily really my knowledge point. I obviously became an expert in it very quickly, at least in the field that I'm in, not in the expanse of all chemistry. But our tipping point was really when we started seeing the pull rather than the push. Often you're going out and you're selling yourself, you're selling your product, you're selling the skills that whatever it is your service is providing. At some point, there's that transition point where there's that pull from the community, the market. SiGNa, although it is a basis of a chemistry company, we really brand ourselves as an energy company, both traditional and advanced. We have lots of chemical sales in oil and gas and in fracking, enhanced oil recovery, areas like that with some of our clean chemical suite. And then the other is our batteries and fuel cell division, where we have the only hydrogen chemical system providing power to fuel cells in the market today. So it was that pull that we were starting to get from really large organizations, from the biggest pharmaceutical companies, the biggest energy and consumer product companies, the biggest oil and gas firms. It was that when you started saying, oh, you've got something here. And that transition is really an amazing experience to go from that push to pull scenario.
Well, this is your fourth venture.
Yeah.
So conceivably, there was a tipping point with each one of those two. Has it gotten easier? Did you learn something?
It's actually gotten harder. My first company was really a lucky position. I was a researcher since ninth grade. I was a finalist in the Westinghouse, which is, I think, now the Intel Science Competition. And I got a full scholarship on medical research to Washington University in St. Louis. It was the first time I ever got on an airplane to leave New York. And I got there, I got into the medical school, I was doing research, and I hated every second of it. It just wasn't for me. Medical research, it was just a different type of twist to it. And I had a friend who was a upperclassman who was a chemical engineer. And he was doing a problem set, and I was sort of looking over his shoulder at the time, and I was like, oh, I could do this. And I was sort of doing his homework, something to do with pledging. But the point is that, I sort of made that transition, and, to graduate on time, being a New Yorker, I thought St. Louis was going to be just like New York. It was not. For those of you who haven't visited, it's different. So I didn't want to spend an extra year there. It was just not quite fitting to my home base. So I wasn't going to. The engineering program was a very regimented structure for when you had to take your classes. So to get out in time, I took all my senior level classes freshman year, and then I sort of went backwards. So I was able to go through that. And luckily, I took an engineering design class that had these extra credit problems. And it turned out that after we got these problems, it was, they were problems that were brought from the professor's friends in industry that were having trouble in their specific department solving a problem. And I had solved one of them. He wanted a 2-page report. I handed in a 30-page provisional patent and a working demo. He called his friend called me. He asked if he could meet with me. I said, sure. I showed up in shorts and a t-shirt. He showed up with a team of suits. And it sort of went from there. They supported basically me in developing my idea and me supporting their team to prove out concept, expand the technology. By my junior year, I had sold it for a nice exit plus a royalty on the device, and it's basically the technology that supports the pulse oximeter today. So every hospital bed, every ambulance has one of those, little red light clips that measures your oxygen and CO2. Comes from that. So that was really the easiest because I didn't really have to do much. It was kind of nice, but the chemical industry is a tough industry. It does, often people say it's plagued with a not invented here sort of philosophy in the large organizations. That's changing, which is nice to see. They're starting to now, have their own venture arms, their own interdisciplinary, collaborative forums. But it still takes, time. It is a more conservative industry compared to what we're seeing now and where pharma and biotech has sort of now gotten to, where IT has sort of always been. Even though it's a little bit of an earlier time, so it's a little bit of a harder sell because the chemical industry takes a lot of time, a lot of money to infrastructure to put those pieces and that security in place. Pfizer is not going to take a chemical in their process unless they know it's going to be there for a very, very long time. And as a growing organization, that's a big risk to them. So you got to come up with creative ways to make sure you can supply their need for the lifetime. And that, that took a lot of time itself. Not saying Pfizer's a customer, but just because our customers are confidential. But you have to come up with creative ways to secure that supply chain. And as a growing organization, that's not a simple thing to do.
So how do you deal with the naysayers along the way? I mean, there must have been some. There probably were a lot, right?
Yeah, it's entrepreneurs have a passion. They have a drive. The naysayers don't really matter. Actually, they're inspiration, right? You just want to be able to, there's a lot of entrepreneurs will tell you, they went out and they raised money for months and years. Every VC they went to and they were told, not this time. No, you need to be this. No, you need to do that. And you always hear about those entrepreneurs that come back and, and say, you know what, I did it. And they sort of, there's one of the more successful, U.S. entrepreneurs, right, is the founder of FedEx. He came up with FedEx as a B-school project, for those of you that don't know the story. And when he submitted his idea for FedEx, he was told, he got a B or B minus, something like that, was told that the fax machine would kill his idea. And every year since they've gone public, he's faxed his quarterly earnings report to the professor. So that's a great inspiration. It's sort of, it's, you just, and he does it every quarter. And so it's it's those are motivators. Those naysayers just become motivation for people that really want to get their product out there. All scientists have that desire to invent that new thing, whether it's in the lab or whether it's in the commercial space. It's that drive to see people utilizing the invention that they come up with that, can really change the world, or they change a small part of the world, but it could be a really big influence to some segment of people. From the Snuggie to the to a new form of energy. It just doesn't it doesn't really matter. It's just getting that product out there and seeing people really enjoy or benefit from its use.
Well, I know that you're off to California after this, right?
Yes.
You were in California last week. Before that, you were in Germany. So you're all over the world.
Yes.
You're almost constantly traveling.
Unfortunately.
Well, I don't know. Is that the case? Because you have a choice.
No,
right?
You don't. No, you really don't. And people, they romanticize the travel. It's like, oh, you get to see all these great places and all these, I see them from the inside of a boardroom. And, and chemical companies, yeah, you fly into these really nice cities, but typically the chemical facility is about an hour and a half outside in the place you don't really want to be in that country. So it's not as romantic as it sounds. But I am accumulating a ton of frequent flyer miles, which will, hopefully, I think I have 1 million miles on a few different airlines at this point. But, it is an experience. Obviously, doing business, internationally now, we sell into 54 countries. It's grown quickly, but it's a burden. It really is it's not an easy lifestyle, especially when you're doing it all yourself at the start. When a lot of, there's some entrepreneurs in the room that are just starting out. That's the hardest part, until you can get enough revenue in that you can build up the partner base and other people that can start sharing some of the need. But you do it, and you refuse to quit. It really comes back to that principle.
Yeah, but tell me more about why. Because I know, like was it 2009, you turned down The Bachelor?
Yes,
Yeah.
So it was a little before that, but yes, it was 2006. That was more personal. But when I got the phone call to be on The Bachelor, I thought it just probably wouldn't be good for my future entrepreneurial endeavors. You may not get taken as seriously as when you go into a boardroom, but yes,
and earlier you mentioned, that
I got to remember not to tell you stories anymore.
It's too late. I know them.
I know.
But when you're talking about this, I mean, you obviously made some choices that you would rather go, and there must be something driving you to make you want to.
Can I say the money? No.
But you have enough money, right? How much money do you need?
Well, you can always use more. I've got the ACS needs things, and there's good nonprofits out there that you want to help. But no, there's nothing like bringing a new product to the world or having that new discovery. I was never a good fundamental scientist, and I think it really is a shame actually that a lot of the funding out through the government these days require you to have an applied vision to that science. I think there is still a need for fundamental science that's done in academic labs. You don't always have to be solving the world's energy problems or the world's medical issues or diagnostics or things like that. I think there is a room for fundamental scientists. And the funny thing is SiGNa, my first hire in SiGNa was a professor at Michigan State, Jim Dye, member of the National Academy of Sciences. He's actually the only person alive that modified the periodic table and didn't win a Nobel Prize. He is a consummate fundamental scientist. He is a true inspiration, a brilliant teacher. He's 87 years old, 86 years old now. He'll kill me for getting that wrong. And he still has undergraduates. We fund his lab 100%. He doesn't get grants any longer. But we have a deal with Michigan State that as long as he stays there, we'll pay for his lab or his external grant. And he still has undergrads coming in. And that passion for that discovery is fantastic. And he always says to me, once he figures out all the chemistry behind the stuff he's working on with us, he'll retire. And that was a very long time ago that he said that. And I think his wife is kind of angry at us. But it's that passion for bringing that innovation out, and it's a passion just to see that discovery. It's really, that's what the driver is. If you're doing it for the money, it's really not the right thing. There's no guarantee for success, and you're going to spend a lot more time, a lot more effort, a lot more to the effort than you'll probably ever get out. It's a very small percentage of patents that get granted, and it's an even smaller percentage of those granted patents that become actual successful commercial products. So if that's your only inspiration, it's a real tough thing. The one variable that any entrepreneur has to look for is time. Money is not the problem. You could always raise money. I could probably, if somebody needed $1 million right now, I could probably find people to raise that for you. The time is the variable. The cost of capital is always variable around time. If you need the money today, raising that money is going to be a lot more expensive than raising the money when you don't need it. When you've got $10 million in the bank and you start raising that next round of funding, it's a lot easier because you're not under that tight time lane where people will ultimately take advantage of it because everybody wants to make money on everybody else's success, which is perfectly fine. That's it's capitalistic. So time is that finite resource, and unfortunately, you've got to you're going to have to juggle that time differently. It could be a strain on family. It could be a strain on friends. It could be a strain on everything else, and the entrepreneur has to be able to sustain that and move that forward. And that's really probably the toughest thing as an entrepreneur, because when you convince people to leave their companies, you always want the most experienced and the smartest of people, and you can poach them from some of the best companies out there, the BASFs, the Dows, the DuPonts, all the real high-end chemical companies out there. Some of them are in this audience, the 3Ms. You get a lot of those really smart people, and you've got to convince them to come work with you on a venture that's a little, still unknown of how it's going to get its traction. It's not that it's not a good idea. It's not that it's not commercial, but lots of good ideas die. Just because they aren't funded properly, they're not managed properly, they're not viewed properly or put out into the world in a proper package. So it's a risk, and you've got to stay, you've got to be, on top of your commitment to the venture to make sure that those people who are taking that risk alongside you, have a future with you.
We have several students here. We also have some people that have been displaced from pharma or other industries. And we were talking in the back earlier. I was talking with them, and they were asking me about different routes that they could take, and many of them are considering becoming an entrepreneur. So is there any advice that you would give them? Is there any way that they would know if this is the right route for them?
Yeah, it really comes, there's no set criteria to be an entrepreneur. It's not, if you have, there's no checklist to say, oh, I've got 4 or 5 of these, I can do it. It's really up to your own willingness to really, live an idea. Obviously, you have to have an idea that's worth pushing forward, but those are out there. And there's great organizations out there now that there's a company or a group called Venture for America that's out there. It's a nonprofit that it's like Teach for America. It's venture groups in sort of non-established entrepreneurial centers, which does some pretty interesting things. They bring recent graduates out of school that want to take that entrepreneurial step, but they're not quite sure what it is or how it is, and you go and work in sort of these more developing communities for entrepreneurial ventures. Detroit, New Orleans, Las Vegas, places like that. If you're one of those people that really just has that that passionate drive, it's worth taking a chance. Or just come to, a lot of those startups are looking, if those that are displaced, to keep something on your resume so that you don't have that gap. There are small consulting jobs or partnerships or things like that where you can keep that that skill set going, and even learning new things. Having if you're displaced from a large organization and you get this an early stage organization under your belt, it is just interesting to see that difference. There's a lot more. Things are done completely differently than in big organizations and in small organizations. There's not as much structure, so they're still learning how to do all the steps that are sort of known throughout larger organizations. How to or putting a requisition form in, doing invention disclosures, things like that have just the entrepreneurs are not necessarily the most organized in putting together. So there's a lot of skill sets. Even if you're not primarily focused on that science or that technology that's being commercialized, there's plenty of things you can contribute to that area. And then for the people that are graduating from schools, there's nothing like starting in a startup. You'll learn the most you can ever learn, working in a startup. You'll be, doesn't matter if you come in as an engineer, you'll learn some business, and you'll learn, I like to refer to myself as the chief executive officer and also the chief bottle washer. Nobody's there to clean the toilet. That's me. When we first started out, you can do everything and in between, and it really is an opportunity to wear a lot of different hats and see a lot of different avenues that you won't know existed. I didn't know engineering existed until I got to college. I only knew chemistry, biology, and physics because that's what I learned in high school, and earth science, which I guess is still a science. So when I got to college, I learned engineering. And when you get to an entrepreneurial situation, you learn all these other roles in an organization that you wouldn't really get in a large organization where you're really focused in your job, because there's other people doing all those other jobs. In a startup of 10 people, there's 100 jobs that need to get done, and luckily you'll be able to fill 20 of them, if you can. And that really is a great way to figure out how to do it, and see how you fit wearing those hats. If it's not for you, you'll find out real fast. If it is for you, you'll want to do it on your own, and you'll be like, oh, let me think of something else I can make on my own and do it and give it a try.
Okay, you said that time was one of the most important resources
Yes.
for an entrepreneur, and we have some of it left, and we want to give that to you. If you have questions, raise your hand. Ken will bring around a microphone. If you're online and you want to ask us questions, just use the hashtag ACS Webinars, and we'll pick that up off of Twitter.
Wow, you're so fancy.
We do it all.
I don't think I even have a Twitter account.
Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. My name is Jayendra Bhosle, Jay, and I come from Asta Drug Discovery and Research. And my question to you is this, that what I understand, just not for being an entrepreneur, but for any human endeavor, for any human activity, what's very important is interpersonal relationship, but especially for running a business, that thing takes far more, I mean, the importance is magnified. So what is in your, since you have been so successful, you must be a master at that thing. So how do you say that? And some people, you have to be endowed by it. If you don't have it, you get so, and that can really be a thing. So if somebody doesn't have it, do you think that person should even venture into being an entrepreneur at all?
Yes. I don't know if
So just in case people weren't able to hear all of it, it was about you need to be good at interpersonal relationships.
Right.
And how important is that? And if you're not good at that, what do you do?
I don't know how, if I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but my nickname in college was Asshole Mike. So, sorry, Madeline. My interpersonal skills are can go either way. As an entrepreneur, you have a speed to your lifestyle, and then being a New Yorker, you have a little bit more of a speed to your lifestyle. So you don't have a whole lot of patience, and I appreciate all the people in this room who I've worked with in the entrepreneurial initiative that they've had to put up with that at times, and they are incredibly patient. You work through it. You have to be able to communicate your idea. You have to be able to talk about your why your product or why your idea is needed out there. You need to get those words out there, but you don't have to be the charismatic guy that works the room all the time. I don't. It helps. I'm sure there are people that do it. I'm not one of them. I don't think it's a critical thing, but you have to be able to get out there, and you do have to be able to shake hands, and you do have to give your 3-minute elevator pitch. That's the key to every entrepreneur, right? If you can give your idea from getting from floor 1 to floor in New York City up, you get up to like floor 25. If you can give your pitch in that instant, that's really what you need to be able to do, and you can rehearse that, and you can get through that. And then once you start, meeting more people, you start to overcome those challenges. But you don't have to start off that way. You can start off in a pretty rehearsed situation and then get it out there. So I don't think that should ever be an impetus. And if you can't, you partner with somebody who can, right? You're the guy behind the curtain, and they're the person in front of the curtain. There's a lot of successful stories, people that don't know who the brains were behind the project.
So it's that old saying, fake it till you make it.
Exactly.
So you've said multiple times that the entrepreneur wears multiple hats.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of hats do you wear towards the beginning when you're starting a business? And what is the most important one versus somewhere towards the middle and versus towards the end? At the end, are you just a visionary, or what kind of hat do you wear more now and kind of work backwards when you start?
I don't think there's a one answer for that. It just depends on what kind of operational entrepreneur you are, right? There's 2 types of entrepreneurs. There's the operational entrepreneur, and then there's the idea entrepreneur that spins out his technology and somebody else runs it. Now, I've always been an operational entrepreneur. Now we're in this growth phase. I wouldn't say we're definitely not at the large company side, but we're definitely in a huge growth trajectory phase. Usually this is when the entrepreneur sort of steps aside and they hire real management to come in or promote within those more seasoned biz dev and operations and those types of people to come up. I have stayed at the top, it's just worked out that way. There's no pride of authorship. Most entrepreneurs don't have a pride of authorship. They have, they want to just make it successful. So, you do ultimately, in that case, when the entrepreneur at the highest of growth stages, when they do step maybe a little bit more to the chairman of the board or to a CTO or a visionary type component, But at the early on stage, the hat that you're wearing most is really the networking and fundraising side and partnering side. It's all sort of one, right? Because you're just trying to get people to believe in your idea. You're out raising money, you're trying to hire, you're trying to get consultants, you're trying to get partners, you're trying to get somebody to give you a discount in a fee because you want to work with them, but you can't afford it because you're strapped with cash. So it's really everywhere in between. In the growth phase, you really do have to focus. You've got to pick those key areas where you can really grow quick. The key is really to get on that revenue track. Get out of the lab, get into the commercialization, the piloting, that type of area faster. But you have to have a strong basis for it. So there's really no simple answer to that question. I've worn every one of them at some point in time with one venture or another. So it's tricky. But you have to. I would say that that lack of pride of authorship allows you to really take on whatever that need is, and I think that's probably the most important characteristic.
So what are you doing 90% of the time?
Now, deal structure, advanced deals for future growth. That's why I'm on the plane so often. I'm meeting with other executives to put together partnerships for product.
Okay, we have a question in the back.
Hi, Sandy Soa from Atlantic Biosci. Thanks for your presentation. It's very good. Question, in your early stage startups, how did you obtain business expertise given that you are a scientist? I have a knack for business, kind of, if I can sort of caveat it. I've luckily been the best salesperson for my ideas from their start. But really, you want to get that, the best person to hire, at an early stage is that person that can help evaluate those markets, help evaluate the opportunities out there, and then help you choose the best one. Whether it's the shortest sales cycle or the highest margin or, whatever your variable and your timelines are for that. So it's a combination of self-work, and it's a combination of the right partner. Or the right hire into the organization. Typically, one of the, if you're a single founder, then you're sort of on your own. But if usually co-founders, one of those people usually has that skill set. At least from what I've seen in a lot of the entrepreneurial setups from there. But it's one of those people you want to get early if you don't have it yourself.
One of the things, I know we have a question coming up, but one of the things that's proliferating very quickly right now are programs to help you with business skills. So if you have the scientific skills and you're looking for more business training, there are a lot of programs that are out there. Certainly ACS, through the Entrepreneurial Initiative, we have the Entrepreneurial Training Program with Kaufman. But there are many others that are also very, very good and may even fit your needs better. So if that's a need that you have, the federal agencies have that, private organizations have that. That's something you should look for.
All right, we have time for 2 more brief questions and brief responses before we get to our next session.
Okay.
So I'm approached by many people who have worked in industry, who have a creative idea, who want to monetize it. At this point in time, they feel that it's a little too late for them to take business courses, but capitalize on my own. What kind of advice would you offer to these people who have maybe a brilliant idea, an entrepreneurial mindset, but who feel it's a little too slow to go in business? And my corollary question, by the way, is 2 of us were sitting talking on these wonderful chairs, and we were ejected, and they said they are needed for the panelists. Now I'm very delighted that 2 chemists and not 2 MBAs have got the throne. But what skill did you use to persuade them of?
So just so I get it right, does the person who have the idea want to be part of the entrepreneurial venture, or is he just looking to sort of hand off the idea to somebody? I don't know if there's a set equation for that. Obviously there's a lot of people out there that are experienced entrepreneurs that exit. VCs do this
very well. It's one of the few things they do well in sort of this space of venture capital. But they have entrepreneurs in residence, and so what their skill set is are people that have done ventures before, they've been successful, and they've exited, and now they're looking for something to do. And there's a lot of those people around. You'd be surprised how easy it is to find them. And so I would suggest looking for one of those types of people to partner with, because that would probably be your best way forward, in the sense you've got somebody who knows entrepreneurial growth, somebody who knows the financing world because they're associated with those types of groups, and they've had that exit before, which is a great team member to have. That, you know, is very rare, that, you know, you've got somebody who's taken something from start to finish and done it again.
Yeah, thinking about your background, and also given this type of audience that you're addressing, would you think that your new product concept ideas are dominated more by seeing a market need and then figuring out a chemical solution to it, or do you tend to see people or think about a technology and then try to adapt that into a business?
So personally, and I can speak for myself, I tend to look at a market and then look at what's out there and put them together. I've never invented anything that's really brand new. It's not like a new element or compound or anything. I've taken things from different areas and I brought them together through a novel way to make a new product. You know, basically, you know, SiGNa is based on, you know, it's got a treatment process and some other complexities to it, but it's the basis of, you know, silica gels type technology and sodium metal. Sodium metal sold by two of the biggest organizations in the world, and silica gel sold by some of the biggest companies out there as well. And we just brought them together and said, oh, may be able to do this. You know, my pulse oximeter, my plastics business before this, which was a water-soluble polymer, all came from just tweaks on stuff that's out there and combining them in different ways, which makes the easiest product because, you know, your raw materials are still out there. So I look at it personally from a market, because it's got, you know, you've got that focus for where you're heading. It's a lot harder to start in the lab and just come up with an invention and say, oh, it could possibly use to this. At least in my head it is. There are some people that are really, really good at that, you know, out there. But so that's sort of my take of it.
Well, thanks, Michael.
Thank you
for joining us today. Thanks to all of you. We have another great talk coming up after this, and we appreciate all of you for tuning in online as well as coming here on site.
Thank you very much.
Turn it over to Ken.